including YouTube. But of course, YouTube is still, while it's the centerpiece of the show, it's still problematic in terms of the censorship standards, which you never know where you're going to be. All right, my guest, Charles Moscowitz, here Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 and beyond, at all of our live stream subscribers, with the flagship still being YouTube. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Drew Allen is my guest. Let me just call things up here. Let's see. Drew Allen is a Texas-bred, California-based conservative author and thinker. Fluent in Italian, Drew has lived and worked in Italy, in the fashion industry, and in New York City and Los Angeles as an actor, screenwriter, and independent film producer. He's the host of the blog Drew Thomas Allen, where he opines on opinion that tends to be on the conservative side. Drew, thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
You know, Drew, my first question right off the bat is based on your biography, filmmaker, actor. I mean, how is it that you are able to function successfully as a conservative in this atmosphere?
Yeah, so I will say it's a very difficult and hostile atmosphere. I've kind of got one foot in, but mostly out, moving into what I'm doing now, right? Writing for different, AM Greatness, BizPack Review, hosting a podcast, The Drew Allen Show. And so, honestly, all of that seems frivolous to me now, those other endeavors. The state of the nation and this country and the dangerous precipice we're on, that's taking all of my attention at this point. And I'm happy to be doing this and focus on this and basically doing my part, as an American citizen to preserve this nation for, our posterity as it's been done for you and I.
You're part of what I think is an obvious and organic and dynamic movement that should and ought to include both conservatives like myself and liberals, people that might have supported Bernie Sanders, for example, in that many of the things that you're articulating are the very same things that they stood for. And I think that the movement really got launched, quite frankly, due to this last election, November 3rd. We're not going to question the legitimacy of the present administration because I'll get kicked off YouTube if I do. But and they are, look, Biden is the president of the United States and Kamala Harris is vice president. They were sworn in, and that's the way it goes. But there was a movement that seemed to have been triggered as a result of the, so let's just say, circumstances around that election and how that thing unfolded. And one of the byproducts of that was censorship. Suddenly you had a sitting president of the United States removed from his ability to be on social network, and that was condemned by world leaders all over the world. And yet that happened under false pretenses, I would suggest. And the result was that it opened the floodgates to censoring opinions in this country, which is really analogous to a, kind of an authoritarian system. So now I have to tiptoe around with you on what we can and can't talk about. And yet we need to discuss legitimate issues that are in the mainstream. We're not trying to be subversive and overthrowing the government here. We're talking about genuine issues that are controversies in daily life, something we assume we should be able to do in this country. So I don't know, Drew, I guess my question for you, or you might want to comment, is do you feel that you are a part of an active and dynamic and energetic movement at this point? And how do you think that constitutes? But who's in it?
Yeah, I do believe I'm part of this movement. I think throughout our history, we have faced many trials and tribulations, of course. This one, the authoritarianism that is represented overtly now by the Democratic Party, that's unprecedented, certainly in my lifetime. But, I'll say this, I believe wholeheartedly. I'm not just saying this because I want to be optimistic. I really believe this. And that is that America is still a predominantly conservative, Constitution-loving country. We're not the minority. The problem is you have a media, and obviously you have an administration here who is well, telling Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, what they should be censoring, which is outrageous, of course. And so, it's difficult if you're watching CNN or NBC to understand the dynamic out there because, they fabricate and invent this false reality that we're not actually living in, which would make it seem like, oh, the Democrat Party who, the Senate split 50-50, but they've got a supermajority somehow. That's the way they present themselves. But their ideas are wildly unpopular. Defund the police is one example I would point to. They knew that was a proverbial metaphorical noose around their necks back in 2020 going into the election. They came out and said it. And they also admitted that, they shouldn't even talk about socialism because it's wildly unpopular. And so that's Democrats in private meetings talking about that. So that gives you real insight into what their real thoughts and beliefs are. And so now they're trying to put this defund the police movement we've seen at the feet of the Republican Party, which is, you can't make a bigger lie than that in so many ways. They own it. They've always owned it. The Republicans have never been for that, even the worst ones like Mitch McConnell. And so, they're desperate right now. I think they understand that they're unraveling. They understand that they're not popular. They understand that if midterms were held tomorrow, as imperfect as the Republican Party is, we would still, we'd mop the floor with the Democrat Party. And so that's why you see them acting out like this in such desperation. But unfortunately, their desperation, it also has dangerous consequences. And that's, to your point, this movement to basically, to censor and eliminate voices of opposition.
Right. I think you've nailed it. They're expecting a bloodbath in the midterm elections. They're standing for unpopular issues, whether they want to own them or not. Defund the police has resulted in not only the defunding of police in major cities, but the anti-police rhetoric that they glorified all last summer as their shock troops looted Black businesses and burned Black neighborhoods and murdered Black people, including children in Chicago. While they glorified that, policemen who felt demoralized, they retired early, or they decided, young men and women decided not to go into policing. They didn't join the academy. So you have, and especially in the big cities, people leaving the police profession by droves. And the result has been a concurrent uptick in crime of the worst kind in the major cities, where you have people in 42nd Street in New York being shot in broad daylight. It's unprecedented levels. And so, that's not making them popular. Neither is critical race theory, where people are really rebelling against this kind of racist, made up history. That's almost like what they did in Nazi Germany, where they taught race theory to young children. But I think that the wedge issue for them, and maybe, I don't know, this is just speculation on my part, is the issue of the ongoing pandemic and the vaccines. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not anti-vax. I had the vax and I'm fine, and as is my family. That was a choice that I made. I neither condone it or condemn it. It's a personal choice. People need to look at that and make their own decision. But you have a move now, and apparently Mitch McConnell is on board with it, to mandate vaccines. And I think if that happens, with a slight threat associated with that, which is that if we don't have 100% vaccinated, then there's going to be shutdowns. Now, they haven't come out and said it, but it seems like there's an implied threat there. My fear is that this is going to be a last-ditch desperate move, but they're going to do a shutdown, probably as we get close to the election. And they're going to do the same thing they did in the last election, which is mail out millions of unsolicited ballots. And the same sort of thing is going to happen, where you have ballots sent out without a chain of custody. Now, of course, in Massachusetts, where I am, we're pretty conservative about that. We didn't do that, I don't think. And we didn't, I had an absentee ballot, and I read the fine print on the envelope, which said that if you in any way engage in any kind of fraud, you get fined up to $10,000. You do 5 years in prison. And when I sent it back, I had to request it. They checked it at the town, office, and they checked my signature. But that didn't happen in other states, and I'm fearing that if there's a lockdown, they're going to do this again. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that they're definitely going to leave that option on the table for themselves, certainly. I mean, I think what they didn't anticipate was having a couple people defect in the Senate who aren't going to go for example, getting rid of the filibuster, and also for passing this S1 bill, which was previously called the HR1 bill, which is very similar to what the Nazi Party did in Germany prior to their seizure of power. They call it the For the People Act, and this is a typical trope of totalitarians throughout history. They give it a name that gives it the auspice of having some benefit to the society, when in reality it does the opposite. So the For the People Act federalizes elections, of course, as we know. So basically, it allows the Democrat Party to control the way elections are conducted in all 50 states. So whatever you think happened in those swing states that were controversial in 2020, well, they want to make sure that happens in perpetuity. But since they can't get that passed right now, it doesn't look like that's going to be an option for them moving into 2022, certainly. Well, here's another thing they want to open up. But there's something else important about how they utilized COVID. Mm-hmm. And it is that I called it and wrote about it and said it was the great un-American experiment. Because the way they used it, and Barack Obama came out and said it in an interview with Ezra Klein not too long ago, it was an opportunity for them to fundamentally transform the relationship between the government and the citizenry, right? So the Constitution declares that we have unalienable rights. The Constitution declares that we, the people, are master, and the government, they are our servant. Well, what have we seen happen over the last year with the shutdowns? They have flipped the Constitution on its head. And not only have they done that, but they have convinced many Americans that their rights are not inalienable. Where I live in California, for example, people are happy to go along and do whatever Newsom says, whatever the Democrat Party says, whatever a politician says, If they tell you to mask up and wear 10 masks tomorrow, guess what? Mm-hmm. Californians are going to do it. If they tell you to shut down your business tomorrow, many Californians are going to do it. And they have Stockholm syndrome, right? Their oppressors are the ones that they continue to defend. And when I came out trying to point out the hypocrisy and absurdity out here in California with what Newsom was doing, how disgusting it was and reprehensible, and I talked to these businesses and said, what are you doing? Why don't you stand up for yourself? They can't do this to you. They won't allow you to have outdoor dining, but the cities have set up outdoor dining and encourage you to take your food to go and sit out at unsanitized tables on your own. It doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah. And and they would attack me.
No, it's insane. In fact, in New York, they had an influx of rats. I mean, it was horrible with the outdoor, dining in Manhattan. But since you're in California, Drew, I should ask what's going on with, not everybody's on board with Newsom. He's being recalled, or there's like a special election. What's happening with that? Is he going to face a serious opponent? Would you consider running for governor?
I would not at this point. I was a little disappointed to hear that Rick Grinnell decided not to run for governor.
Oh, I know. That's too bad.
I think that, he's an amazing, I think, look, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. He could be planning something in 2024 with Trump or whatever happens there. So, no doubt he's in the fight, and he is waging a valiant effort in California to fix voter rolls and do all sorts of stuff and bring lawsuits. So Rick Grinnell is a great patriot, but I was disappointed. But I am actually very excited about Larry Elder. Having spent a lot of time out here, I've heard him on the radio. He is a conservative. He's on the record. He's thought through these issues for a long time. He lives in California. And I think that he would make a fantastic governor at this point. And it's kind of a wonky system out here, the way it works, because, 51% or whatever have to vote to recall Newsom, I think it is. And then it's just a simple majority that has to vote for who to replace him. Mm-hmm. And it's basically like a yes or no ballot when you go in there to vote. So, I haven't experienced something like this. I'm 34. It hasn't happened for obviously quite a while out here. It's right. Relatively unprecedented, but he's doing everything he can now to make people forget what he did to them over the past year. He's trying to buy their votes, give them freebies, and do everything he can. They tried to keep Larry Elder, off the ballot recently. Mm-hmm. By saying he made some mistake with his submission, which he didn't. Larry Elder sued in court, and the court upheld that Larry Elder could be on the ballot to run for governor. But I think that shows they're fearful of the situation, because they believe that somebody like Larry Elder, who's an African American out here, might actually get some rational thought.
You might have a shot. And talk about voter suppression. They actually tried to keep him off the ballot, but I think that's now been resolved by a state judge. I think we have a call. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. What's on your mind? You're on with Drew Allen.
I'm just wondering, sorry, what?
You're on with Drew Allen and yours truly, Charles Moscowitz.
Yes, Charles. Wondering about your thoughts on the apparent rumors that Bryan Danielson and CM Punk might be signing with AEW.
I have no idea. I don't know who those people are. Drew?
Well, they're two of the hottest free agents in wrestling right now, and if they end up there, who knows what the Khan family might do with them? I mean,
I don't really follow wrestling. I like it, but I don't really. I'm not up on it.
And we don't even know if he's in ring shape. Bryan Danielson, on the other hand, just had a banger with Roman Reigns just a few months ago. So
yeah, I have no idea.
Who knows? I mean, they might debut in New York City at Arthur Ashe. We don't know.
I'm not up on the sport, but you obviously are. So keep an eye, keep a tab on it.
I feel like this could be a game changer for AEW. You never know.
All right, thank you. I don't know anything about it.
Interest in WWE is kind of waning. You know, the McMahon family, they might not be in touch with the fans too much anymore.
Well, they've kind of gone real political anyway. But anyway, listen, thanks a lot.
But I think you're missing out on a big thing here.
Well, I'll check it out. Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. You're certainly welcome to join the conversation. And we are 617-396-4958 if you'd like to call in. 617-396-4958 as I'm doing the live program. So Drew, back to politics. You know, I think that he is going to have to face an election, and I believe that if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be in September. And you know, I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not really up in California politics. I just heard that Los Angeles, is it not also shutting restaurants again or something like that?
So that they reinstituted mask mandates in Los Angeles County, but one of the sheriffs already came out and said he will not be enforcing that mandate. Of course, you know, my sister works down there. And where she works, they're requiring them to wear masks, I believe, at work. So, you know, this is the California mentality. You know, they can't think for themselves. They're happy to live in slavery. And that's the problem really in America is you have a large portion of this population who thinks their rights come from the government, who is weak-kneed and can't think for themselves. You know, they represent the antithesis of the American.
What can we do to educate them?
Well, you know, what's happening, for one, my presence staying in California, not just me, but I use myself as an example. You know, a lot of people are fleeing California, and that's fine. People can do what they want. But I think a lot of us have to stick around as well and wage this war, this ideological war, because, you know, if no one in California is ever confronted with an idea that is different, that isn't what they've been taught and indoctrinated with, well, you're never going to get through them. But Larry Elder is a perfect opportunity to change that because you have a national stage now. I mean, look, California, 6th largest economy in the world, huge state. You know, essentially, this is like a presidential election, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, it is. California is bigger than most economies in the world. It's enormous, and it could have an earthquake-like effect. I think if Newsom goes down, it would be huge, even if he went down by another Democrat. You know, you mentioned the H1 bill that they call We the People. Anytime a bill has a name like that, you should run fast away from it. It's like the motherhood and apple pie bill. You know, these are like propaganda. But yeah, it would have federalized elections, and people need to remember that every elections of 50 elections in 50 states every 2 years. And the presidential election in that sense is no different every 4 years. It is 50 individual elections, and you have state legislators regulating how the election takes place. That's in the Constitution, Article 2. You know, that's not even controversial because they knew that it could be, the founding fathers knew that elections could be manipulated by outside forces. And some of the very same things that I would suggest already is happening and did happen. And yet when states try to regulate their elections, they are being attacked for having something against Black people, or, you know, you have secretaries of states and judges and governors stepping in and superseding the power of the legislature, which holds sole plenary power to make laws around elections. And a lot of people believe that, you know, they're like, this should be done by the federal government. Somehow it's suppressing black votes, which is the exact opposite, because if you cast a false vote, that's voter suppression. I mean, if you vote for X and a false vote is cast for Y, your vote has been suppressed.
Yep.
Whether you're black or white, doesn't matter. So, but what do you say to that kind of propaganda and those sorts of, that kind of agitprop?
Well, it's not working anymore. They've tried this voter ID garbage argument for years and years and years. And, you know, even Democrats aren't buying it. You know, I mean, the point's been made. You know, I can rehash it. It's common sense, right? You need an ID to open a bank account, an ID to drive a car, an ID to buy cigarettes and alcohol. So, you know, many of these individuals are buying cigarettes and alcohol, and they certainly get on planes and drive cars. So that's not an issue at all. So it's absurd. But, you know, I did want to bring up something with you because, you know, you were talking about what, you know, some of the things without us getting kicked off YouTube here. You know, the state legislature in Pennsylvania there, right? So, you know, they have the authority to set election law, period. It's in the state constitution. It's their sole authority. And you had the Pennsylvania Supreme Court bypass them and change election laws. That was unconstitutional. Now, I want to come back to something else important. Mm-hmm. You know, people think that, you know, 2020 was unprecedented. It was not. We had a contested election in 1876. All right. That is when Rutherford B. Hayes was the Republican presidential candidate running against Samuel Tilden. All right. This was just a decade after the Civil War. And Rutherford B. Hayes said, it's written down, that if he lost that election, it would be because of voter suppression and intimidation in the South, in the southern states, and fake votes, essentially, okay, cheating. And, you know, the difference, of course, in that case was Rutherford B. Hayes went to bed knowing it was hopeless that they were going to do what they did. And that, you know, they did claim victory. But, you know, and of course, Donald Trump went to bed thinking he had it in the bag. But back then, the Republicans had cojones, so to speak, okay? They took it to the very bitter end. They did not concede, and that was the difference. And what did it result in? Well, Rutherford B. Hayes was the president, okay? And the Samuel Tilden, the Democrat Party, even threatened Tilden or war. Think about hearing that 10 years after the Civil War. It was a living memory. Everyone knew someone who had died, who had been injured, who had experienced that violence of the Civil War. The Democrats threatened Tilden or war, and the Republicans still contested those votes and took it to the end. So anyway, the only reason I bring that up is people think 2020, oh, you know, it had to go that way. It didn't. And, you know, the Republicans, in my opinion, Mike Pence included, they showed they didn't have what it takes, especially when the stakes were so high.
No, look at, I mean, I could give the other example of the Kennedy-Nixon election. I mean,
yeah,
we love Kennedy. He's a great man. You know, he's from Massachusetts. I mean, I certainly grew up idolizing Kennedy and still admire him. But nevertheless, I mean, it took about 20 years for journalists and reporters to really definitively uncover the fact that Nixon had won that election and that Kennedy had received like 30,000 votes from Chicago graveyards. Now, that's not even controversial to say that now. I mean, JFK Jr. joked about that in a speech. But Nixon decided not to contest it. And Nixon was not, I mean, the circumstances today are different because Nixon was actually more liberal than Kennedy. There's not a lot of difference between them. Whereas with Trump, he is significantly different and he has a movement. I mean, there is a groundswell of people, you know, 70 million people around him that voted for him. It's not the same. It's something where you have people who aren't just going to say, okay, we'll wait till next time. There is a real movement there. And, you know, people are making comments about recent polls, which indicate that 42% of Republicans still believe that the election was I don't want to use the S word, but you know what I mean.
Well, hey, can we do this way? Because I don't think YouTube can kick us off if we use liberal talking points. Democrats.
Well, they can kick us off any way they want, but you know, I just think that let's just say that Tom Brady recently made a comment at the White House where they say that he took a dig at Trump when he said that 42% of Americans don't believe he won. I actually think that he was helping Trump by saying that because the number's a lot bigger than that. I mean, and I would even suggest most Democrats in their heart of hearts know that there were major problems in that election. They may not care because they hate Trump so much for whatever irrational reason. And so they're glad that it happened. But everyone knows something happened that was not exactly kosher on election on November 3rd. I'm not going to say what, and I'm not questioning the legitimacy of the present occupant because he was sworn in and he is the president of the United States and Kamala Harris is the vice president. That is our system. They are president. I'm not questioning that. We're talking about the atmosphere, let's just say, right? See, we have to talk in euphemisms now.
Well, Hillary Clinton still claims that the 2016 election was stolen.
I mean, look, the government
claimed it the entire time he was president.
Not only did she claim it, but there's recently a video that's come up where she's saying that it was taken because the voting machines were apparently online, according to Hillary, and that the routers were being controlled, interestingly. In fact, on that subject, not to get into something too deep here, Lester Holt, right, NBC News, did a whole segment on this where they interviewed data scientists who said, yeah, there's something like thousands of voting machines that are online and that this is a big, big problem with fraud. And my own Senator, Elizabeth Warren, brought this up in the US Senate a couple of years ago. She ain't saying nothing now, but, she did at the time. So, this is out there. I mean, there were problems. And as far as questioning the legitimacy of the election, I mean, didn't the Democrats spend 4 years pushing this cockamamie conspiracy theory that Donald Trump was spying for Russia and Russia helped him or, quote, colluded with him to put him in office? That's questioning the legitimacy of an election. I don't think that YouTube was censoring any of that. In fact, we heard about that every night for month after month when they even got this Mueller in his brown shirts spent like $40 million chasing old men down and putting them in prison for solitary confinement over that one.
Yeah. I mean, look, we kind of started talking about censorship in the beginning, and what's remarkable is the Democratic Party is the party of lies. Okay, if anyone should be censored, they should censor themselves because Russia collusion, quid pro quo, even the events around January 6th. Hillary Clinton tweeted out not too long ago that Brian Sicknick, who was a Capitol police officer who died, well, he died of natural causes. He died of strokes and a heart attack. The DC coroner reported it. CNN even ran the headline that that's what happened. And she still claims that protesters killed him. I mean, where's the censorship there? Of course, we know why, because, well, they're colluding. I mean, Facebook and Twitter are literally colluding with the Democratic Party. It's amazing.
Yeah, that whole thing, there was all this miasma of lies around that. And I think that I'm on safe ground by saying, because I think it's been widely reported at this point, that at least some of the ringleaders were either FBI agents or FBI informants, or in some relationship with the FBI.
Look what happened. Look what happened. What just came out, the revelations about, remember the Whitmer kidnapping plot?
Yes.
The FBI was intimately involved with trying to make that happen. They got involved with this group who are just kind of Second Amendment people, from what I've read. Mm-hmm. And the FBI was the one, those agents, one of them was even second in command of this group. He worked his way up. They were planting the seed of this kidnapping. They were encouraging these people to take action and do this. I mean, that's outrageous. So incredible. If that's happening, why is it unbelievable to say that, to understand that also happened on January 6th? It's not.
If they want to get rid of domestic terrorism in the United States, probably the best thing to do would be to get rid of the FBI, right? Yeah. For starters. Now they're going to have this phony investigation. And I think it's unprecedented that the minority party, which gets to seat, I think, a certain number of people on the committees of whatever it might be, that Pelosi has said no to two of the people that McCarthy wanted to seat, one of them being Jim Jordan, because they're not going to be rubber stamps. I don't know, for whatever reason. Now, finally, but McCarthy has a little backbone, and he said that he's withdrawing all of them. So, I mean, that's once again going to go into the category of just a political idiotic stunt, because no one is going to, it's just, they're going to have but they're going to keep that. We'll never hear the end of it. I mean, I don't think it's going to work for them, but.
No, but this is just one of their other tools in their toolbox, right? Whether it's COVID waiting in the wings to come and shut us down again. This is also, Rick Grinnell tweeted out the other day, and I should have an article coming out about this soon, maybe later today. But he tweeted that he talked to Donald Trump and he'd say Donald Trump's going to run. Okay. So regardless of what other people think about that, I would be in favor of that. And you can read about it in the article when it comes out, why. But, the Democrat Party fears Donald Trump and they fear his supporters. So I think this January 6th narrative, it's not just about destroying the political opposition and labeling us domestic terrorists and utilizing that to stick us in jail if they want to. But it's also about making sure that they have ammunition if Trump decides to run again in 2024. They fear that above all else. And that's, look, all you got to do is look to CNN to find out what we should do. Because if they come out and are condemning something or saying, X, Y, and Z and expressing their fear of Donald Trump, well, that tells us that he's actually a viable candidate. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're going after anyone who's ever been seen with Trump in a hotel lobby. I mean, you could end up being, they took his the manager of his company and they basically shackled them and took him away because he took a perk that everyone in business takes. I mean, I know people, you get like a pass to travel the train to work. That's a perk, and he didn't declare it on his taxes, which probably is not true either. But I mean, this kind of prosecution, I think that's going to backfire on them because I think that everyone's shaking their heads and saying, gee, that could be me. Maybe I'm going to be in the opposition and they're going to go after me with a microscope and they're going to start to like rummage through every receipt I ever wrote, and this kind of ugly, authoritarian approach, which is really unbecoming a free society. I mean, can you imagine if the New York prosecutor put that kind of standard on Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation? Holy mackerel. I mean, talk about a corrupt, racket. But it's obvious that we have a two-tiered system of justice. Well, and that's one of the most dangerous things to our republic is this two-tiered justice system, because what we essentially have is mob rule. All right. The Democrats lead the mob. BLM can go and riot, loot, pillage, and kill. Yeah. And they are bailed out of jail. Be glorified for it every night on CNN with big pictures. These people, and meanwhile, they're spreading COVID. People are wondering, by the way, I hate to, I might get in trouble for this one, but since we're on the topic, suddenly there's an uptick in the COVID virus. Every European nation, and I think probably most nations in the world, as a matter of routine, are careful about who enters the country right now with viruses. You get checked for whether or not you've either had the vaccine or at least have been tested at the airport or at the point of entry. That is every country except this country. We're not doing that here. We're letting thousands of people come in unchecked every day, and they are moving to cities all over the United States. So we wonder why there's an increase in the virus, and we wonder whether or not there might be complicity in terms of maybe some people want to see. I'm not trying to weave a conspiracy theory here. Or maybe I am. I don't know. I mean, it seems awfully coincidental. Well, it's not conspiracy. You just look at the facts and it stares you right in the face. I mean, there's two answers and both of them can be right. I mean, on the one hand, they don't really fear the virus or care about the virus. Regardless, it's all politically motivated. And that's what it points to. Because here in America, they're telling all the unvaccinated, oh, you're a danger, you're a threat to all of us. You got to mandate vaccines, vaccine passports. And yet people are flooding through the border that are testing positive for the virus, and there's no comment whatsoever. No, they let them go. So, they want these individuals here, obviously, for political gain. They don't want Cubans here because Cubans love America. Oh, yeah. Isn't that interesting? Suddenly they're saying any Cuban whose foot steps in Florida is going to be arrested. Right. Yeah. There's a country where you have a communist dictatorship pulling out their brown, their black shirts, literally. I mean, they're military and they're engaging in unspeakable crimes and oppression against people and human rights abuses. We can't even know what's going on over there because there's no freedom of the press. Nothing. You hear crickets on that one. Well, but the interesting thing that's happening right now amidst this overt totalitarianism from the left to create, a one-party rule in perpetuity here, Well, you have Cubans who are protesting and proudly waving the American flag. They want to be America.
In Havana, I may add.
In Havana, exactly.
It's
so
like
they want to be America.
Yeah.
And we're on track to become Cuba.
It's very ironic, isn't it? And it's so true. And I think everyone knows it in their heart of hearts. And you seem to be optimistic, Drew. I'm glad to see that. I am too. I mean, I think that, in spite of these setbacks, and they're not insignificant, I do think that what President Trump accurately called the deep state is being exposed, and they ain't getting away with it. And I think that we're going to see things happen, certainly in the midterms. And I actually personally think that Donald Trump is going to be reelected in 2024.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah. And look, I think the thing that's important for people to understand, though, is this won't end in 2024, okay? This is a decades-long fight that we have to be engaged in actively, all right? It's going to take a long time to clear this up and fix this country. And, we just have to be realistic. And look, that's what we're called to do, right? That's our duty. We inherited the greatest nation in the history of the world, and it's existed for us, and we've got to make sure it exists for the next generation. I think people are up to the task. They're stepping up and standing up. But I just want to be realistic with people. Just get ready for a long fight. You can't go back to sleep.
That's right. We have to be counter-Fabians. It could take 100 years to fight, and it'll never be over. But we have to restore the high ground in terms of people's consciousness about freedom and institutions of genuine democracy and Judeo-Christian values and all of the rest. So, Drew, let my listeners and viewers know where they can reach you and read your articles and where you can be found.
Yeah, so I post all my articles over on my website that are published. So I put them up at drewthomasallen.com, so they can subscribe there. They can email me from there. They can find my book there, Uncommon Sense. And then if they want to listen to my podcast, I do 1 or 2 a week right now, and it's called The Drew Allen Show. And that's on Apple Podcasts. It's also on Spotify and pretty much everywhere you can get a podcast. Excellent.
Good. We should all of like mind kind of like intersect and kind of help each other and build sort of this critical mass. So I applaud you for what you're doing. You got a lot of courage, and I think it's going to work out well. So I want to thank you for joining me, Drew.
Oh, thank you. Anytime. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care. All right. Thank you for joining me, everybody. I shall return the usual time tomorrow. Have a good afternoon.